Sam Levinson is incredibly short-sighted. The first season of Euphoria, as we see it now, was lightning in a bottle. A really good, sometimes over-dramatic story about teenagers being smart enough to make their own decisions in the world, but not in touch with their own souls to understand what's wrong with them. It had every reason to succeed. A fantastic cast, clear-cut storylines, creative cinematography, an interesting color palette, and a mesmerizing soundtrack. It was all iconic. Then season 2 was released, and it steered away from the first season in terms of innocence. It had more shock value, more sexual suggestions, with raw and brutal performances. Regardless of the controversy of the second season from audience reactions, it still felt like it belonged in the same vein as Euphoria season 1. Now, season 3 has just come out, fully embracing a soft reboot onto the show, but also performing as the potential finale of the show, shifting its focus on these teenagers' place in the world into a Quentin Tarantino-inspired Western homage, where the main plot centers around two rival gangs, strippers, loan sharks, Cassie's attempt at becoming an OnlyFans household name, with Maddie as her pimp,
I'm your fucking boss, bitch.
Jules as a sugar baby, and Rue managing strippers while also working for the DEA. I would like to say I wasn't seeing this coming, but I've never lowered my guard with Sam Levinson because I must never forget this is the same guy who made Assassination Nation, and he's shown his true colors once again. Season 3 of Euphoria has grown into a needless and boring story that left me and my girlfriend feeling like we wasted an hour of our life every Sunday, and the only time we talk about this show is to acknowledge that there's not much to talk about. I swear, if season 2 ended and then we got a sneak peek as to what season 3 would have been like, most of the audience would vote to end the show on season 2. But Levinson felt like the story just had to continue.
Please give a warm welcome to...
I feel like I almost made this video to right a wrong with my channel, specifically the brief conversation about Cassie in my Euphoria Season 2 video. I mentioned how Cassie's constant sexualization was a perfectly explainable build-up from her upbringing, rather than an excuse to put Sydney Sweeney in softcore porno scenarios. This really good concept of tragic beauty, this woman that could have lived a life of ambition, expressionism, and artistry, but has been held back by her eye of the beholder level beauty, to be later on sucked down into the chains of being a trophy wife. One thing I won't take back was with season 2's version of Cassie being a naturally sexual person. It's true that her mind is constantly in a sexual place because of the people who objectified her over and over again to always be thinking from a sexual point of view, because she was inadvertently taught, my value is my body. I never thought it was some crime of the harlot theme with Cassie. She was just incredibly seduced by the dangerous mystique of Nate and the danger of being caught by Maddie. But a lot of the comments on that video were more complaining about the real life unsettling feeling that Levinson was forcing Sydney Sweeney to be put in sexual scenarios more and more when it felt completely unnecessary. Almost like a sexual plaything dynamic. Well, I have to say, you were all right. Oh my God. Except one thing. I don't think Sydney is being forced at all to do these things. I think she's frankly happy to do so. But it does feel like Levinson is keeping a spotlight under Sydney because she's willing to go the extra mile. Like how he keeps Faye in the series, so when Zendaya doesn't feel comfortable deep-throating Fent balls, Faye can fill that role. Besides the rumored drama on set, Cassie's character has been set aside for the sake of her out of the blue but also childhood dream of being a successful star / OnlyFans sponsorship.
I don't think you can make money that fast.
I mean, you can on OnlyFans. I started reading and it's actually the biggest misconception. I mean, the platform's used to sell content, communicate. I'd be the one in charge.
Download the app now for free.
Cassie's rise to fame as some sort of raunchy Marilyn Monroe wasn't fascinating to watch. Maddie's genius plan to get Cassie shoutouts and collabs with LA influencers didn't have the Instagram heist of the century feel that Levinson wanted us to have. I understand the things Levinson had Sydney do in this season are all accurate to the job description of being an OnlyFans porn star, but it really did feel like a more dangerous undertone was really happening. I remember when I saw Weapons in theaters, there was a realization from my end, which was Zach Cregger adding all sorts of different phobias into the movie to target people's different responses that make them squeamish, like clowns, needles, witches, body horror. The same can be said about what kink to fulfill with Sydney Sweeney. Adult babies, foot fetishes, macrophilia, role play, ASMR squishing boobies. Now, I know I can sometimes sound like a prudish grandmother clutching her pearls, but I'm just not a fan of this. I compliment Levinson for not making this arc feel repetitive to Kat's arc as an online dominatrix from season 1, but I'll take Kat's story 10 times over Cassie's. Kat's online persona was slowly creeping into her real world, where the overall lesson learned was the difference between being a cruel, mean-spirited person and a confident, self-respecting woman. It had a point, and it had a perfectly acceptable bow to tie on the end of her arc. But with Cassie, where's this all leading to? What's the point besides the main achievement of having Cassie be an OnlyFans model? It was interesting with Cassie's desire for fame having interesting moral questions on what she would do to achieve such things. But it's taken in a direction where I don't think those decisions leak into her soul, and it gets quite boring when the only solution towards those steps to stardom are just seducing and sleeping with celebrities. This applies to all the characters, but it really does feel like the Cassie and Maddie we knew are gone. There's only so many times Lexi can be the self-aware Sam Levinson insert before it feels like these characters are shrinking and shrinking every iteration.
Let's toast this bottle full of poison to a life full of pain and disappointment.
It's very fascinating to see Rue's journey, to go from the just got out of rehab begging for some meaning in her life sweet girl, to the rock bottom addict betrayed by her throuple, to then being Euphoria's Scooby-Doo mascot. Similar situation to Jacob Elordi, Zendaya's schedule is much busier to everyone else's, so she doesn't feel connected to the story. She's in her own Alamo pocket dimension this season, and I can fucking feel it. I'm at least glad to see that Rue is still the heart of the show, especially in the back half of the season, but still, I thought the simple farmer devout Christian theme Rue's going through this season was a little tacky. Levinson having a glossy-eyed look at the Old West and simple country bumpkins is a little stupid for a show like this. There's always been little moments about God in this show, but this time around, it's in your face a part of the show's theme. I started to actually like the shtick when it was later expressed that Rue's path to finding God is all of a desperate fantasy to get out of her enslavement to the drug and sex trafficking trade. She feels like she's done so much wrong that the only way to find forgiveness is through Christianity because it invites redemption no matter what you've done, which is a huge compliment I'll give to Sam Levinson. If he focused more on character dynamics and internal struggles rather than his boring forced debauchery, I would forgive a lot more of his work. Take this scene for example. Rue is hanging out in Jules' place and Rue's fantasizing about a simple life with no responsibilities or stresses. She wants a way out, but she's expressing to Jules that she wants to have a wife and children one day, which was the wrong thing to say because the night previous. Jules' sugar daddy finds out that Jules and Rue slept together. He tells her that he gives her a lot of freedom, but he won't allow her to have sex with other people because of the threat of an STD. He blatantly says to Jules, "You aren't my life, my wife and my kids are." So back to this conversation. Rue bringing up the prospect of having children instantly puts a trigger onto Jules. She thought she finally made it, a lifestyle that would encourage her to focus on her art while fulfilling her sexual desires with her sugar daddy. But the red flags start to show. She starts to believe that no one will understand her art and by extension herself, and the representation of her sexual desires telling her that she doesn't matter in comparison to the real deal, she's just some cheap fling. So through Rue's ramblings, Jules is increasingly growing more resentment towards that family life because it's breaking her loyalty to her sugar daddy. And she hates feeling the truth that she is a nobody plaything hidden away from the rest of the world. Jules starts self-sabotaging her relationship with Rue, even to the point of inadvertently breaking up with Rue to keep her fantasy from shattering. She slaps Rue and sends her off. A scene like this is perfect, and I got so mad after watching this because it shows that this can be really good and should absolutely be the core of the story, not Cassie's ridiculous journey and Alamo's gang wars. I go more into it later in the video, but when it comes to Rue's death, it's really up to the person. If you felt like Rue's ending should inspire hope for other real-world addicts who look up to her character, or Rue's ending should be brutal and an example of how quick and fleeting your life is on these drugs, then that's up to you. But I will overall say it was a tragic murder, but it wasn't satisfying. I'd love to talk more about Rue, but just like Sam Levinson, he overshadowed her for
Keep going till I'm the oldest man. I walk this path with soulless hands.
There's a lot of attention on Alamo Brown, and I think the whole I'm a cowboy theme with him is so fucking stupid. His name's Alamo. He dresses like a cowboy, and he's got himself a nice old cowboy accent, yes sure. His stake in the story is tremendous. He is in every single episode of this season. I think Alamo represents a bigger problem in Euphoria, which is this isn't a drug-dealing, women-peddling, gang war action story. It was supposed to be about teenagers and their plight of growing up. That being said, let's try to swallow that pill that this show is a drug-dealing, women-peddling, gang war action story. Alamo isn't interesting. He's kind of just a default mob boss. In the episode 6 cold open, they showed a brief story in Alamo's childhood. His mom and dad split, and his mom starts dating this very kind man with acid burns on his face. He had claims to sue the acid company that was responsible for his face, and he won the settlement. He had all the money in the world to take care of his new family. But one day, as they come home from the beach, all of their possessions have been robbed. His mom claims that the man is bad luck and can't take care of a family, so she insists on storming out. Alamo realizes when they get back to his birth dad's apartment that this was all a con from her mother and father to steal that man's wealth through his newfound possessions. A horrible glimpse into a rotten soul that is his mother. And what's Alamo's reaction?
Never again would a bitch outsmart him.
Levinson was batting 100 with all of these characters' backstories, but this is a huge stretch where I don't see the connection. I could take this scene as him simply saying that this is Alamo's attitude towards being a boss, but I don't know, maybe I'm too dumb and it needs to be spelled out a little more. Does he only feel this way when someone like Lori is trying to step on his toes? Or when Rue is being an obvious snitch? Or is this hatred so palpable towards his mom that he became a sex trafficker all in the name to subconsciously take revenge on his overbearing, manipulative mother? Is it none of those things, one of those things, or all of those things? I'm really not too sure, because they relate the backstory to what's happening in the present day, which is confronting Rue about being a snitch. So it has to be about that, right? The problem is, there is such a thing as too subtle, to the point where the audience won't catch what you're trying to set up. There's a lot of moments that feel like this in the final season. I think the reason why I'm feeling this way is because I can tell Sam got more excited about Preston's story than Alamo's. It feels like Sam is purposefully keeping things ambiguous to leave it up to us to actually flesh out his story. It's not subtle, it's a cop-out. Overall, Alamo doesn't feel like a real person to me. He feels like a television character, and I mean that in a bad way. The actor did a great job, but this character is a square peg in a round hole. Nate Jacobs is a victim of Jacob Elordi's scheduling, plain and simple. But it's so frustrating to see this golden character be given the respectful exit in the show. Ultimately, I have to respect the behind-the-scenes decisions. If these stars want to exit this weird-ass show, then be my guest. But it doesn't mean any of my criticisms are gonna go away. With the episodes Nate made full appearances in with the first half of the season, he became completely different. The Nate from the first and second season wasn't a social person.
He was a serial killer who bragged about killing people.
The way he spoke to people wasn't monotone and bleak, but it was under the guise of condescending and patronizing. He looked down on a lot of people and was a completely self-aware person who used it to his advantage. He was scary smart and was seen as a real threat. Then Sam made Nate into this smiley, conman, pathetic Saul Goodman type, which is one hell of a whiplash considering those are two polar opposite personality types. And I can't express enough how literally I mean that. Nate was incredibly blunt and direct to people with little consideration to how they felt. He was a bully through and through. There was a moment in season 3 where I thought maybe Levinson was going to set up some sort of sleeping giant inside of Nate that was going to be brought out, but he instead focused on Nate Jacobs' torture porn for the rest of the season. Beyond his villain role, the dynamic between his father and himself was one of the most interesting and complex relationships in the show. Nate's dad was a closeted pansexual his entire life, and in season 2, Cal had a big act of defiance, finally unleashing to the world who he truly is. Nate grows frustrated that his dad abandoned his family and goes out to do whatever he wants. Meanwhile, the rest of them are forced to lay in his wake. So he eventually calls the cops on his own father for the unknown amount of sex crimes he committed on tape over the years. Then to immediately get minimized when Nate's dad comes for the wedding, seemingly back in the closet and narrowly avoided prison. It went from the end of the Jacobs family into this little awkward family hiccup. Rest in peace to Eric Dane, but what's the point of bringing Cal back if it's meant to dismiss a very powerful ending to their story? Especially since Nate dying this season will be the last we see of any of the Jacobs family in this show. It would have been more gut-wrenching if Nate's father wasn't there and have his character's spirit and stain on the family be represented in the crumbling family company Nate was taking over. That would be more compelling as to why he's not getting any investment money, not because of the random endangered flowers holding him back, but because his father was an established member of the community for many years only to turn out to be a pedophile. So Nate gets more and more desperate, maybe even begin the official first step to Nate's gay prophecy. It's always been a part of Nate's character that he chooses to be hyper-aggressive masculine to avoid the shocking realization of his father's pansexual double life. There was this occasional tension inside of Nate that he might be just like his dad because of his connection to Jules. So he forces himself to be the exact opposite, which obviously leads to nowhere because he died from a fucking rattlesnake. But man, an arc with Nate struggling to become a construction tycoon because of his father once again ruining his life, but Nate trying to refuse his father's infamy through doing whatever it takes to keep the ship afloat, even allowing Cassie to run off and become the OnlyFans star she craves. It would have been interesting. It still could have led to him dying. The tension with the loan shark would have been a better build-up as well. The choice of having Nate's business falling apart in the very first episode left us wondering, who the hell is this guy, and why would Nate even do business with him besides the generic answer of he needed money? Now, with Nate's death. Sam Levinson said the way Nate went out in the show was designed for audience discourse, to talk about whether or not Nate actually deserved the over-the-top fate in this show, which I think is a completely misguided way to look at it. What Sam is saying here is you all hated Nate a lot, so here's a whole season of him being a pathetic, blubbering mess to fuel our Nate hate catharsis, even though we already got it from the first episode in season 2. But I'll have him die in such a horrible way to make you debate on Twitter discussing if he was ever really that terrible. Nate dying 6 feet underground to rattlesnake poison isn't symbolic to his character, isn't interesting for his character, and wasn't the way for his story to end. I know at the time of writing this video, Euphoria is officially over, and I can't help but feel it's because of Rue and Nate's deaths to speed up the process. I'm always going to be curious, if it was just Nate who died and not Rue, would Sam keep the door open to a season 4? I hope not, because this death would feel very jarring. It's like I said earlier, of course it's due to Jacob Elordi's decision to leave the show, but to trade a satisfying conclusion for audience discussion is destined for Nate's relevancy to stay buried with him. I would love for this video to be a complete deconstruction of each character, lasting about 10 minutes each segment, but this story has become increasingly simpler and simpler because of Sam's short-sightedness. I'd like to say, I'm not being an internet hater on this show. I loved the first 2 seasons. There were so many scenes that made me become a blubbering mess and really care about where these characters were going, but this season just wasn't it.
So what the fuck I've been doing all this time?
You've been building a business for you. To be free.
I'm just another slave with a little more money in my hand.
It doesn't move me, man.
I do not buy that all the characters this season end up in sex worker adjacent positions because it points out the underlying issues of female over-sexualization and exploitation. No, it's because this show is the epitome, thank you, of porn brain. It's like I said in my last video, Sam can't have a subtle and sincere story about these teenagers' internal struggles focusing on their pursuit of happiness. He demands to have sex, drugs, and rock and roll, baby. One thing I feel like I need to bring up for my SchmeckleDeck girlies is, where is the cuntiness? Where's the pussy poppin', eyes watering, sister I'm pickled baddies? The only one to have that in spirit is Maddie, but in wardrobe only. Levinson is clearly a writer that thinks in a male point of view. That doesn't mean he's a bad writer. It just means he has passed the threshold between telling an objective story and a story that's so coked up with the male gaze that it's made women I know personally feel very uncomfortable with the show. I think he writes both genders very well, but this season kind of reeks that it was written by a dude. I think Levinson sat down in front of his leather book filled with crayon doodles of naked boobies and looked at the overall theme of chaos in season 2, wondered what the new theme should be, and decided it was boredom. Rue's internal struggle, while touching, is more of the same. Cassie's road to fame isn't as fun or silly as Levinson thinks it is, and it overstays its welcome because it takes up majority of the screen time. Maddie is just a parasite to Cassie's story, so she has no identity. Nate being a way less interesting character even with his little screen time sets up his character to be forgotten. Lexi and Jules having tinier arcs is completely fine, but it once again makes me feel like these characters aren't connected. It feels like these actors filmed all all their scenes in a week. Him flailing with his characters is exactly why he decided to do a soft reboot on the series. But it would have helped. Instead of constantly having a question mark of continuing the show at the end of each season, he would just have the balls to realize what he was making, declaring this is the final season of the show. If he did that, I don't think he would have stuck with the Western theme. And I'm saying this to a very literal extent. No one wanted this. If Levinson decided to pitch this season's story outside of using the Euphoria IP in a brand new show, I really think HBO would pass, or it would flop like a certain other Levinson project of his. One thing I'll still say about this show is that the fans of it are unbearable. The bickering between what they thought about Rue's death showed that the feels for her actual character weren't there in the final season, because if it was truly a touching goodbye, then people would accept what happened much quicker. People saw her as a representation of addicts and thought of this show all of a sudden as a dare campaign, rather than Rue as her own person with goals, struggles, and the tragedy of her overdosing when she's been off hard drugs for a long time. The debate for the most part is the optimistic versus the nihilistic. One side wanting Rue to achieve freedom and forgiveness versus the other side wanting the show to go down the realistic and damned route. Imagine a world with me here where you're both right. Not everything needs an objective truth. Rue clearly was tortured with her time on Earth. As a 7-year-old kid, she was already tapped out.
I'm just fucking exhausted.
In a way, her death is freedom to her, but the cause of her death is her damnation. The actual problem with her death is, we spent so much time on these quirky plot lines rather than spending time with the true essence of her character, so it doesn't achieve the proper emotions out of me. Maybe it would be different if I rewatched the first 2 seasons, then immediately hopped to the series finale. But I shouldn't have to do that for the main character dying. And I swear I'm not being cold-hearted just for this video. While getting footage, I would accidentally watch whole scenes from the first 2 seasons. There were so many scenes that instantly sparked something in me, but I don't feel it here in the 3rd season, and that hurts me. What I ended up feeling was, Rue's death was sad in the sense of me not wanting Rue to die, but Rue's death was overshadowed by the fucking Wild Wild West themes. And it annoyed me that we didn't see any big reactions from any of her loved ones. They all seemed to have moved on pretty quick. We had some moments where characters were holding back tears and smacking countertops, but when I get the feeling that the farmer family that Rue met once grieved more than any of her actual friends, then that's not a proper funeral for the character. And don't tell me that's done on purpose because it's realistic to show how Rue has burned bridges and the inherent trust with her loved ones. Yeah, but they would still be torn to shreds about someone they loved. Sometimes it's not all about realism. It's about being a TV show that has established these characters are extremely expressive and emotional, but not anymore apparently. Here's the thing about this season. It's well written, it's shot well, the actors, for the most part, elevate the material, the lighting's really great, the sets are distinct, even the extras work this season was great. The world felt so alive. But here's my thing. It's boring. Sam's best work is in character writing, and guess what's lacking this season? Character writing. So all we're left with is different characters named the same names, people with the same faces as the characters from Euphoria, but they're not here. Just empty husks because Levinson wanted to make a Western. If Euphoria is still mentioned in 10, 20, 30 years from now, it'll be for the first 2 seasons. The only thing they'll mention from season 3 is Rue dying and teenagers jacking off. I have a message for Sam Levinson. You need to start thinking things through. I don't know if you view these seasons as their own isolated 8-hour-long movies, but it needs to stop. I remember when those 2 special episodes of the show came out, with it being an hour-long dialogue between Rue speaking with Ali and Jules speaking with her therapist. And it was fantastic. It told me that you truly understand these characters and where to take them, and understood the core was in their story. I placed my trust in you. After watching the season 3 finale, I'm glad Jacob Elordi and Zendaya forced you to end the show via their character deaths, because there's no way to continue without either of them. And even if you do find a way and release a 4th season without talking to anybody, I don't think it's worth my time. It's going to be the exact same as the season 2 finale. You tied up all these storylines and then you didn't know where to go. So you clung to the Tarantino-esque Western shtick that ran a lot of mileage on your audience. It's time to start asking the big questions, Sam. Who are you and what are your shows really about?